At National Academy of Performing Arts, NAPA, we have a very special guest from Sharjah. Well, actually, he's not from Sharjah, he's from the United Kingdom. Daniel Gott, Daniel McAllister Gott. Dan, thanks for joining us here at NAPA. Tell me one thing. What were your expectations when you came here?
Expectations. Well, they've all kind of been blown out of the water. I feel a bit embarrassed to say what my expectations were. Um, I've lived and worked in a lot of Islamic countries before, and often that culture um, makes a big difference to people working in performing arts. So I think I was expecting. I don't know. I think I was expecting in some ways the opposite of what I found. What I found are people to be um, very passionate, surprisingly open, and very much eager to work not only on themselves but collaboratively and with each other.
Okay, that. Thank you. I'm happy that it went that way. Uh, what were you? What was your plan? What were you teaching in the first? You conducted two workshops, so and the third one.
So when I knew that I was going to make a trip to Pakistan, I just reached out to NAPA and spoke to Afreen and said, "This is my CV. This is what I can do." And me and Afreen had a conversation about some of the workshops I might run, and that's how we arrived at those. So I've done one 3-hour workshop while I'm here on impulse, and yeah, essentially those some of these big ideas that we work with in theatre that we hear a lot: follow your impulse, be in the moment, etc., etc. But often they're very subjective terms. One director or one teacher will think something completely different to someone else. So we had an experiential workshop that is looking at work from a post-Grotowskian canon. So I used to work in an experimental theatre company called Bread in the Bone at the Grotowski Institute in Wrocław in Poland. That's physical theatre essentially. So I did that for 5 or 6 years, and we, as a company, developed a new actor training model. And then whilst that was ongoing, I was also working in Palestine at a place called the Freedom Theatre. I used to go for 3 or 4 months at a time. And what I ended up doing, eventually I went and studied an MFA in voice. And when I did that, I brought those two worlds of work together. It used to bother me that voice work is certainly in the West, is very much, I don't know, people would say it's wishy-washy. It's lots of lying down and meditating and making sounds and not really connecting it to anything practical. So I took what I learned in the voice course and I took what I already knew from this physical theatre work and brought the two together. So that the big problem with physical theatre is that people say, oh, train the body and then put the voice on top. So instead, I try to train the voice at the same time as the body. So we've done one workshop on Friday for 3 hours that was experiential learning, looking at lots of these different physical theatre exercises. This morning we did a 2-hour workshop on Shakespearean verse, so how to speak Shakespeare in the meter that he works in, and your students worked on Shakespearean sonnets to very great effect. I was very impressed with the level of work in just a simple 2-hour workshop. And then on Monday, I'll give a lecture for anybody who wants to attend in the school about professional voicecraft, how the voice works, how it is made. So we'll look at some anatomy, and we'll also talk about vocal health, how to keep your voice healthy. So that'll be useful for anybody working in administration as well who needs to do public speaking, as well as the performing students who need to use their voice regularly.
You have two very distinct backgrounds: Irish music and Shakespeare, theatre, and all that. I mean, how do you think that those two things merge?
I mean, I think they merge by the same way that anybody's life experience do. As long as you are, as long as you can celebrate your life journey, you'll always bring those unique things together. The same as any of your graduates who, today I think have just had a Punjabi student living in Sindh speaking Shakespeare, and I'm sure in a few years' time he'll be in a similar interview as we're in now, and someone will say to him, "How did you bring all these together?" Just by living life. So I grew up around Irish music, even though I'm from the UK. My parents had a lot of Irish friends, so that community was always around me growing up. I played classical piano as a child. And then when I started to work in touring theatre, when I was in my sort of late teens, early 20s, I couldn't take a piano on the road with me. You can't put a piano on your back. So I started playing the accordion, and just that was like a slow transition at first, but essentially I started playing Irish music, the folk music on the accordion. And even though I'd spent 15 years working up to being, I was a very good classical pianist, but you have to be a genius to get anywhere. And I wasn't a genius, I was just very good. And so when I started playing the accordion, the folk music world is very different. Classical music, there is always a barrier, you know, there's the audience, barrier, performer. And it doesn't matter how accessible you make it, there's always that convention. And what I loved about playing Irish music and the accordion was that suddenly it was much more that everybody is part of the same event. So you're sharing music, not performing it at somebody. And in a traditional Irish session, the way that Irish musicians come together is very theatrical. So the musicians might play a few pieces of dance music or a song, but then someone from the audience might get up and tell a story or sing a song themselves. So it's, that's how that world came together. And then I'd always been interested in acting, trained up in that through going to community theatre, etc. And then when I went to drama school for my undergraduate degree at Rose Bruford College, I did a program in acting musicianship. So everybody it's an acting program, but everybody who's doing it is playing a musical instrument as well to a high standard. And so we would then also do shows. Sometimes that would be Shakespeare, sometimes that would be musical theatre, where any music that is played on stage live by the actors themselves. I grew up, when I was growing up, I was always like, do I want to be a musician? Do I want to be an actor? And when I found out I could be both at once, I was, alhamdulillah, I was very, very happy to be able to do that. And so since then, whether it is doing an MFA in voice, whether it is working in Palestine, in Bahrain, in the Emirates, China, Russia, I've lived and worked in a lot of different places, thankfully. And it's just my life story that brings those very random things together.
You are conducting very short workshops here in Pakistan, but in the UAE, you are an associate professor. You have a full course. What is that course about?
So it's assistant professor. One day I can make associate, inshallah. So at the American University of Sharjah at the moment, we only have a minor program for theatre. So students come to us, they can declare themselves theatre minors, or they can do free elective courses. We also have a music department and a film department. I think the plan is from next year or the following year that they will grow into major programs, so you can do that as your major field of study. But I really enjoy it at the moment. Previously, I've taught in a lot of conservatoires like NAPA that run a full-time training. At the moment, I work with a lot of engineers, mathematicians, biochemical engineers, psychologists, philosophers. And I can say it makes for very, very interesting conversations. All of theatre is about examining the human condition of who would I be if I lived that person's life? And obviously we're looking to do that truthfully. How can I be that other person? How can I act? How can I be that other person if I imagine and observe how that person has lived? And so when you have these very early conversations in Stanislavskian training, in actor training, about what does it mean to be somebody, how do you become who you are, when you have a very diverse range of study, it really makes those conversations very interesting. And it's always inspiring when you see somebody who thinks that they've only got a passing interest in theatre, or they've never acted before, suddenly be inspired and say, oh, I want to do this all the time. I mean, I have had a few engineers who say, can I do theatre full time instead? But often it's because they recognize themselves in other characters, even if that character is a Shakespearean character, 400 years plus in a language that is very rich and complex, whether that is Chekhov and it is over 100 years old and Russia, or whether it is something modern and more familiar to their setting. But yes, that empathy that is needed to place yourself imaginatively in someone else's circumstances can be a very empowering thing, whoever you are and whatever level you're working at.
Your first time with NAPA, what next? Do you have any plans now for NAPA?
For NAPA, well, this is the first time that I've been here, and thankfully that's with the blessing of my university. So I think, yeah, this is a first step in what will hopefully be a longer journey. We're very hopeful that we can either start some exchanges happening with students. Maybe there's the possibility for performances to come here or go there. And that we can, build an academic and cultural exchange. We're only, I think, an hour and a half away. Sharjah Air Arabia flies from Karachi to Sharjah Airport. The American University is only 5 kilometers from there. So, it seems that, inshallah, this is the start of a lasting and hopefully developing friendship, personal, professional, and academic.
One last question. Your name is Daniel GOTT, but you use Dan McAllis as your performing name. Is that so?
Yeah, that's right. So my full name is Daniel McAllister GOTT. But in my accent, I wouldn't pronounce the T. I'd say my name's Daniel GOTT. And when I first started acting, I got very tired. Like a conversation with a casting director, it'd be like, Daniel GOTT, and they'd be, hot, what, yeah. No, they never knew what to say. So McAllister is my middle name. So I tend to perform as Daniel McAllister and I teach as Daniel GOTT. But if you hear me as Daniel GOTT or Daniel McAllister GOTT, whatever it is, I think I'm a bit, I'm growing in age as well as in professional standing, that I don't really care about the name anymore.
Well, in any case, with any name, Shakespeare said that what's in a name? What's in a name, exactly. So we hope that Dan would be able to come here again and join us, and NAPA and Dan would collaborate on a more serious level. Thank you.
Thank you. Inshallah, I'll come back.